This question is from Rohan. Check on somebody's question before I push the button. Is this why they put muzzles on the women to keep them from speaking the flame language? That actually has, you could add that to the pot too. But really, it's interesting how the whole thing played out because, okay, here's a good example. This is something that actually happened today. So I take it to looking through certain programming these days, like and what's coming across the program in other countries, because I realize that they're just setting some of these other countries up for something that we've already been through. And one of those is India. So I noticed, meaning as a Western world, we've been through a lot of the programming and entertainment, but they're very innocent in many respects. So they haven't seen, they're a little bit, I would say if you want to call that naive, if you want to call that pure innocent, those kind of all roll together. So they're a little bit more naive. They don't need to see stuff blowing up bodies, a hell of a story where you're just like, oh my goodness, that's totally not what I thought was going on. They don't need that yet, right? They just need like a simple story, and they're fascinated because that whole thing with media and Hollywood, Bollywood, et cetera, was just rolling out, okay? So I was noticing that this one company specifically, let me get to this real fast here, but this one company, I saw the beginning of 2 flicks. And it was from the same production company. And the storyline was women need to basically work in men's roles. And this was what, like one was they wanted women to wrestle and the other one wanted women to fly planes, okay? But the story and the subtext, like rebelling against your parents and do whatever you want, and they were even creating music around it. When they even are translating the lyrics, and it was like, man, what is this? Like, what are you trying to create but dissension in someone's household if this is the instructions? It has nothing to do with whether women can be pilots or whether women can be wrestlers. This had to do with creating rebellion and also allowing, let's say, women to become fire. That's what's really happening in California. I mean, California is really Kali. California is a real goddess. They still got pictures, and still got pictures of the indigenous tribes walking through there, and the woman that was the leader, if you may, of all those indigenous tribes. You could tell there's some power going on here. But if you ignite the divine feminine, which the West was also very symbolic. They wanted the West so bad. It has a lot of power to it. Where the sun sets would have a lot of power to it. So long story short, just to get to the question, in Islam, it came to a point where women did figure out their power. And you had many women covens, female covens, that were sprawled throughout the land. And you also had situations where women were being sold. So it became like a norm to that. If you had like a beautiful gem, if you had a woman that was beautiful, you would try to hide her because even somebody else from another kingdom, even the sultan, somebody else would try to actually come and take your wife and take your daughters. So it became this thing to keep women covered up. And then that kind of segued also into suppressing woman's everything, like not just her positions in society, but most importantly, the power that she has when she's able to work with her force, her tantra as her kundalini. And it's because it's like they call it zombie, basically, meaning the poisonous powers. Now, of course, it's a sliding scale. So there's obviously women who know how to use this power to bring in a great deal of abundance, harmony, peace, our great grandmothers, etc. But there's always a flip side to that, right? So that's always what I notice with a lot of the men when they start, carrying the matriarchal flag, which is great, especially if you're healing yourself. But then they kind of go overboard and kind of imagine that there's actually not another side to the divine feminine, just like there's another side to the divine masculine. And that to identify that side, it's already been identified very specifically. And especially in occultism, because in dark occultism, of course, they're going to tap into that inverted womb, which is really the upside down pentagram. So they're going to try to activate all these pains in order to bring out a power that is basically it's just relentless, unrelenting power. Okay. And this power it's like you see a lot of the women, like I said, Beyonce, which I call seance. She was doing it for sure a lot more back in the days. Like now, she's just on her Warhol, as I call it, and same thing, of course, with Cardi. So they use this power, but it's not like they know about how this specifically works because it's not that complicated. Especially when someone else is transferring it into you and putting you in the proper positions on the right days to use you as a conduit for that power. So what I'm saying is that the Catholics and the Muslims alike just decided, let's just put this away. That's why the whole thing became forbidden fruit. It was really this agenda to keep women away from spirituality altogether. That's why it's like, hey, you can't work in a spiritual position because woman starts working in a spiritual position as a let's say a minister, she's going to probably segue, if she can keep her awareness open, she's going to end up segueing into another level of power at some point, just in her genuflection point, meaning that as she starts contemplating and praying and tarrying, as they call it, she's going to entreat something, and that's going to give her certain instructions. So they were like, okay, let's just try to cut it off. But everyone knew that this was not something that you could just end. It was going to be something that was going to, like anything else that gets suppressed, one day explode. And then we were going to be at this point, and we're going to be also so confused about a lot of stuff that's going on around us. This is almost even in itself the author of confusion, because now we don't understand, because the story is completely missing. It's like a missing link. And then we don't understand, well, why are women being suppressed and blah, blah, blah. And then here's another thing, just to make sure the energy stays balanced here, is that it's not a completely patriarchal or negative patriarchal agenda against women. Behind the scenes, many of those covens, like what was Vin Diesel's movie where there was a woman that he had to go and pick up, right? And she had some powers. And in that process, a female coven of older women were in pursuit of this woman. This is the same thing in Dune with the Bene Gesserit witches, okay? There are women that already are completely aware of all this, that have been in covens for thousands of years, using the magnetic energy in order to keep restoring themselves, very similar to like vampires. I think Madonna may even be one of them. And in that process, I mean, absolutely almost Madonna would for sure be one of them because of her name. You wouldn't give her as an occultist or warlock that name unless you could truly embody that inverted aspect of Madonna into that being, the material girl. And so then when you see how many lives that's impacted, that's when you'll understand, yeah, there's an undercurrent going on here. And here's what I will say also to even bring it balance even more. We have to realize also that Earth is capable, and this is something our sister Wishby brought up last night in a beautiful meditation, but Earth is capable of transmuting all of these energies the same way when you breathe in oxygen and then you breathe out carbon dioxide. That's virtually a byproduct from you. Same thing, when you eat this food, it's got energy into it. Then when you defecate it, you've changed the state of the energy. That would become fertilizer and actually food for the environment next door, if you may. So that's also another reality of the powers, is that we have to get familiar with, instead of holding our anger and trying to act like we don't have it, giving it to the earth so earth can transmute that energy. And you would think, well, I don't want to send bad energy to earth. You're kind of like still in a human state trying to think about how this whole being processes energy. It already has the fire, earth, wind, water action going on. So anything that you give will be transmuted. The issue is if you hold it. And that's what I find to be the overall thing with even why women ultimately became veiled was, again, when you're trying to hold these powers, and like I said, we're here now. So this is not something I wish this didn't happen. That's not where I'm at with this. I'm just saying that I would love to be in a space where others didn't try to hold others' power. Like a man could even take a woman, or a woman could take a man and really almost like shroud them and never allow them to be who they truly are. Like keep them locked up in a room somewhere and they never discover their potential, like a troll or an ogre or something like that. So of course, I wish to be in a world that doesn't contain those kind of things. But I also would love for that also to accompany a world where people were responsible for the energy that they bring to each other, which, you know, is an interesting process because that means that we would actually have to go through the training first. And then when we come into the space, because we would learn how to be responsible, we will be able to keep building in the space. And this is what I noticed even about men and women is that they have this kind of yin yang thing going on, and it works for a moment because it like turns the wheel. Yin yang, opposites attract, right? So it's kind of like turning the wheel and we're getting somewhere. And that generally happens, especially in the beginning of a relationship. But then at a certain point, that same force, because of, you know, things that happen in the relationship, it starts going in an opposite direction. And you find that now you're not only not getting where you want it to go anymore, it seems like you're going backwards, or you may be getting stuck, right? And that's just only, hey, let's recall again that we had a yin yang thing always going on in the beginning, and our opposites attracted each other, and we were getting somewhere with that though. I mean, I was liking your poutiness and your cute arguments and that kind of thing, and your, you know, hostilities against my ideals. You know, this was great witty banter, but now this is full blown warfare, and we're going in the opposite direction. How do we restore? So this is just a part of balance. Like I said before, it's like not something that you can just say, okay, I'm balanced and I'm done. It's something that you got to maintain at all times, right?